Hello. Someone with the last name Riley has to appreciate that music. I think it's in the blood. I want to welcome everyone, and I want to welcome our guests. This is an absolutely exquisite event that Pat and the MA committee have put together. The entertainment program in the Communication Masters program is the newest of the areas of emphasis in the school, but it has quickly become one of the most popular. And so this is a real treat, I'm sure, for the students. A lot of the students in this program are evening students. They're working managers. And so you'll notice that as the evening wears on, the audience will fill up as people work their way through LA traffic. But we want to thank our guests. They've come from all over, and Pat is going to introduce everyone individually. But I want to make sure that everyone knows how deeply grateful we are for their time and also for the time of the audience. This is the very last week of school. Regular classes, finals start next week. Everyone in the audience can go, yay, and yell. And we have a number of people that I can see in the audience who are actually graduating and will be marching in commencement in the next couple of weeks. And so it's a very exciting time of the year for the university students. I hope that everyone has a wonderful evening. The school wants to promote more panel discussions like this one, and so the entertainment panel, What Lies Ahead, the Future of Entertainment, I think is the start of many wonderful programs that Pat and all of his successors in the communication management program are going to be putting on. So thank everyone for all their hard work.
Thank you, Patty. I'm going to use this here until I sit down and use this guy up here. Now, first of all, before I begin, I want to thank everybody for being here, but I want to extend apologies from Mark Handler, who is in Japan as we speak, and Saul Berman, who's in New York as we speak, and they called me and let me know today. Get some thank yous out there to everybody that helped put this event together: Vicky Capt, Jim Yoder, Diane Guthman and Ben Chase at events, Lasilia Burns, Gail Light and Anne-Marie, Joy Oakes. Most importantly, Patty Riley helped us with funding and emotional support and all that. Thank you, Patty. Also the ASCMA board, and in particular Candace Park and Jessica Clark, that put a lot of work into this. And now I'll go into talking about our speakers tonight, our panelists tonight. I will start with Ty. I'll say very brief words. Ty is the Vice President of New Media for Virgin Records America. Ty and I met at the National Association of Recording Merchandisers Convention in San Francisco about a month ago, I think. And I went and approached him, and we had a very nice discussion up there. And I asked him if he would be interested in coming to our panel, and he was actually very nice. And he's here with us. He's here with us today to share his thoughts and opinions. Moving on, I have Frank Creighton, who is the Executive Vice President and Director of Anti-Piracy of the Recording Industry Association of America, the RIAA, as it's known by that acronym. Frank joined the RIAA in 1985, and he has overseen all anti-piracy investigations and RIAA's online and internet sound recording piracy program. Under his leadership, the anti-piracy team has secured millions in judgments against infringers, shut down the massive distribution of raw material supplies to major music pirates around the United States, and removed millions of unauthorized sound recordings from the internet. Nationally, he's recognized as a frequent speaker on anti-piracy and copyright-related issues, and he's an active participant in the International Anti-Counterfeiting Coalition and the International Intellectual Property Alliance. Moving on to Robin, who drove here from from San Francisco. By the way, Frank came from Washington, D.C., and thank you sincerely for that, for being here tonight. Robin drove, actually, from San Francisco to be with us today. Robin is an intellectual property attorney with a leading cyber liberties organization, the Electronic Frontier Foundation. She specializes in intellectual property policy and digital music legal issues, and serves as director of EFF's campaign for audiovisual free expression, which she launched in June of 1999 to explore the interaction of intellectual property and freedom of expression in a digital world. The editors of the legal newspaper Los Angeles Daily Journal selected Ms. Cross as one of California's top 10 most influential attorneys in 2001 for her work to advance digital free expression. Thank you, Robin, for being here today. And with a name starting with a W, my professor and a mentor, David Weitzner. I don't have anything written down for David. I'll just tell you a few things from my experience. You have here the mastermind behind the marketing campaigns of E.T., the Extraterrestrial, Jaws, and a few other masterpieces. David was the worldwide president of marketing for MCA, Universal, and he ran the marketing departments of both the film and Universal Studios. And from what I heard today, he's actually, can I say this, David? IMG. He's finishing up a deal with IMG, and I'm very excited to have him here. He's also teaching at USC when he has the time in the cinema school, classes in film, music, marketing, and so forth. Now, there you go. Okay. So we talked about digital distribution. In our classes, we see it everywhere. We experience it in our own lives. With the advent of broadband and the proliferation of broadband, the digital household, where do you see the future of entertainment distribution? What would happen to entertainment now that the pipes are going to be open and all the content will be running freely on the web and other new media devices? I want to start with Ty.
Well, I think digital distribution is fantastic. You know, people are finding all the music they want, they're downloading it, and the record industry is in a tailspin. And the entertainment industry is, as the pipe opens up, will have to change its business model completely, because the previous path that we've pursued is not going to work.
Why is that, Ty?
We don't know. That's the problem. You know, but I do know that, Frank, help me out here. What are we looking at? Probably 3 million people as we speak are downloading music peer-to-peer, right. Probably somewhere in the neighborhood of, probably in a 24-hour period, probably 500 million songs worldwide will be downloaded and right. Not paid for.
Right, but I'm not as pessimistic. Really.
No, but I mean, you know, we start from that, and you're going to open up the pipe bigger. Right. And that's going to mean that, you know, it's going to be very easy to hack DVDs, every episode of Friends, every episode of Rawhide, every episode of Popeye, all that sort of stuff is going to be following a very similar path of peer-to-peer sharing. Right. And the idea of restricting it, Robin, I think you shall have some pretty strong comments about that. Okay. Yeah, you know, I mean, because, and forcing hardware companies to, and you guys, the two of you, can definitely talk about what's the different philosophies are happening at Congress. But I think what's going to happen is that people have found a way to find every piece of music that they want, in many respects, if you're internet savvy. And I think that with home servers and where it's heading, You know, people are learning how to use TiVo. They're learning how to save it. It's just a matter of time that they learn that, hey, you know, I can email last night's episodes of whatever, you know, or I've got pay-per-view and I've saved it on TiVo, and I'm going to find a way to send it to Frank, who's in Washington, D.C., and I live in, you know, in Los Angeles. So I think that, you know, the challenge for a company such as Virgin Records, and maybe you can speak to, you know, the companies that you look at and the companies that you used to work for, is to figure out a way that you can continue to run the corporation, you can charge for it, you can collect on the copyright, and because you need that money to find the best talent to create. But right now, we're at this period of figuring it out, because technology, which always happens, is ahead of the right kind of policy and to figure out business models. And we know that, you know, 80 million people have figured out a way to download music, and probably quite a few million have figured out how to download DVDs and videos and the like. It's just a matter of time. So I think that, you know, as, you know, PC manufacturers have decided that, you know, pretty much they've hit a certain wall as far as sales have flattened out as far as the home computer. The next way to get people to spend $3,000 to $4,000 is to put the home server and to bring people. Everybody sort of knows that what the home server is, right? So I think that as broadband becomes more prolific, I mean, what we're seeing, that we see a lot more people looking at Lenny Kravitz's videos during the day. And I was at an advertising seminar, and they're talking about having different advertising rates, day parting, because, and a lot of us in, you know, the entertainment industry kind of joke that what we're doing is we're programming for people that hate their jobs and lowering productivity. The guy at CBS Sportsline that I met a few months ago, he said, our business model is based upon the fact that 1% of American offices have a television set, 99% don't. And be able to provide sports programming when your boss is not looking. That's our business model.
Interesting.
So I think that, you know, we're at that point where, you know, it's very confusing, very frustrating, and to find where the path is to protect, you know, the people who create copyright, and more importantly, to pay them, you know, to find the next Spielberg that's out here, right? It's when you go to school, one of you's out there, probably. You know, it's going to create some piece of intellectual property that's going to have a huge influence on our culture. But to figure out a way that after you make a gazillion dollars, to convince you to make another one so that, you know, the profit model's there.
Yeah.
I think that, you know, we're going to have to think outside of what we're thinking and be prepared for the fact that, you know, Dell, Microsoft, Compaq, HP, all of them want everyone to have this $3,000 potential server that's going to replace your CD burner, your DVD burner. It's going to replace your home security system. It's going to be a place where you're going to, my understanding is that a terabyte drive now is going to be $950 this year. Great. So?
Well, I want to get everybody's opinion on that a little bit, and then I want to talk about a little bit more about what you think those business models will be. Are we going anywhere with those business models at this point? Is there anything in the near future? Are we talking about the next 10 years, in other words? Let me get everybody's opinion first on what Ty said and all that about business. Frank?
Well, I agree with a lot of what Ty said. However, I also think that, you know, technology, you know, has, while it's created a lot of challenges, it's also created a lot of opportunity for our member companies, and we're actually very excited about those opportunities. It's going to allow our companies to promote and market and distribute, you know, music to fans in ways that were never perceived of before. Unfortunately, some technologies have moved along quicker than others, and you know, the battle that we're confronted with right now is trying to develop technologies that are not going to allow us necessarily to protect content, but allow us to be flexible in how that content is distributed. You know, you know, you may be talking about the computer manufacturers, et cetera. You know, all of these companies are businesses, and their bottom line is about selling their product. Now, unfortunately, their product relies on our product to sell. And so the functionality that you get from their product involves software, it involves music, it involves movies. And so, you know, they actually need our product. And so, but there's no recognition of the fact that our product also needs to be protected. That, you know, if our industry is not protected, our artists are not protected, there's no incentive to continue to create music, and therefore, down the road, you know, our industry may not be a viable industry, and there'll be less music that you'll be able to use on those actual devices. So, I kind of liken what we're going through right now to a comparison between the days of the Pony Express and the way we look at our highway system now. Back in the days where you had horses just running through the desert, there were no paths, there were no highways. You have the eventually horse and buggy, and you start to have dirt roads. And as the Model T comes along and you're actually starting to pave roads, things start to move a little bit faster. And what happens in that evolution is that you actually start to have to incorporate certain types of rules and regulations. There are speed limits, on our highways these days. Everybody needs to have a driver's license to drive on those highways. There are traffic cops out there to make sure that you're adhering to those laws. And I think that's what we're seeing in the information superhighway now. That right now we're at that genesis stage, and that eventually that is going to evolve, and we're all struggling to figure out, what are the appropriate rules that need to be applied in that environment to facilitate commerce and to advance those technologies, and at the same time make sure that everybody gets to enjoy access to those technologies.
Robin.
Well, I think this is one of the most exciting times ever to be an artist, actually, in large part because of digital technology and the internet. In the past, we've lived in a world where, virtually less than 1% of the world's musicians are able to actually make a living in their trade, or filmmakers, directors. But digital technology can change this, because now we've got technology in the hands of the people, so musicians can make their own home recording studios and their own recordings that sound just as good as a lot of the major label stuff, and they don't need the major industry mechanisms in order to promote and distribute, particularly manufacture and distribute their CDs around the world. Digital technology, the internet, can do that for them. So it's a very exciting time, I believe, to be a musician, because you've got so much opportunity in front of you, and you've got so many more choices than artists in the past have had. You don't have to go the one road of signing a contract with a major label and signing over all your rights and essentially having to work for somebody else for the rest of your life. Now you can strike out on your own and really be independent, keep your own copyrights and your own artistic creativity and integrity intact. That's not to say that digital technology also doesn't create some new challenges for artists and musicians as well. I think if you take a look at how we've traditionally compensated artists, it's been through this copyright model that we've invented, and has worked pretty well in the past, where you get a fee per copy distributed, manufactured, but it is really a fee per copy basis. Well, now we're moving into a new world, a digital world, where ease of copying and ease of distribution are the properties of the digital world. And so trying to build a revenue model that compensates artists on a scarcity model, when we are moving into a world where everyone can and will make unlimited copies of things, seems to me to be the surest way to make sure artists will starve, is to maintain this old world model in this new world place. So I think what we really need to be doing is experimenting with new business models, ones that, rather than fighting against the properties of the internet, like ease of copying and ease of distribution, try to embrace these properties and use these as your profit generating concepts, things like product placement and sponsorship. You can look to a lot of the things that are already going on in analog, in the traditional world. Television, for example, is something that feels free to everyone. You don't pay every time you watch a TV show, in the sense you put a quarter in a box, you pay with your attention. And I think experimenting with other new kinds of business models like this, that are not a fee per copy basis, will do wonders to get artists compensated, more music in the hands of consumers, more variety and diversity. So I think this is really a very exciting time, but we have to be smart, and we have to start reevaluating our business models, and we can't just assume that because we've done it this way in the past that it's going to work for us in the future, especially in the digital world. It's different.
David, the film industry is being said to be lucky that technological problems kept all the content from going out into the homes. Not as easy to download a movie as an MP3 and keep it on your hard drive. Do you think the movie industry has learned a lesson from what the music industry has been through? And where do you see?
I think that I agree that there's enormous confusion at the studios right now. There's enormous confusion in terms of the consumer, the end user. is as confused as the studios are. What I found interesting is that there were, about a year ago, about 37, almost 38,000 screens in the United States, which represent approximately 7,000 theaters. There are now about 34,000 active, 35,000 active screens. We were over-screened in this country. And you've seen the consolidation within the theater chains, most of it by Phil Anschutz in terms of now I think he controls about 23% of the total screens in the country. His move is because he believes that the theaters will be all delivering digital product to you very, very shortly. I was reminded during a time at Fox when I worked for Barry Diller, who made a statement with respect to the information superhighway that he'd much prefer to have the McDonald's franchise and feed those who would be going down the superhighway. I would suggest that nobody hold their breath awaiting digital download into theaters at this particular point, for the simple reason that no one knows how it's going to be paid for. It's a very simple situation. Will Exhibition, who own the theaters, pay for the equipment, or will the studios put the equipment in? And at the end of the day, you will pay for it. We all will, because ticket prices will go up, and that's how the studios will make the money to pay for it. The issue, though, really, in my opinion, is, and what's kind of teasing the studios right now, is that attendance has continued to go up at movie theaters, setting a record this past year. And I think that the issue really is, do you want, this is really something we all struggle with. At the end of the day, do you want to watch a film at home, or do you want to see it on a big screen at 185 to 1 aspect ratio with better sound, generally in most theaters? Or do you want to see it on your computer screen? Or do you want to, rent it as a DVD or a video, which will disappear soon? But the real issue is, do you want to see it the way it should be seen? And that is what continues to drive people into the theaters. Yes, there will eventually be digital delivery into all of the theaters, and you will see companies like Technicolor disappear in terms of their current business model. But don't hold your breath, because it is not around the corner, regardless of what you read. But to bring this back for a moment, the studios are in a complete state of confusion, because they're trying to get their hands around the technology, which they don't completely understand. And at the same time, you, all of you, continue to support the industry and to provide the industry with continuing growth in admissions, which kind of sends a signal to the studios that, yeah, we still want to go to the movie theaters to see the films first. What happens after that is a whole other issue. But in first run, we're really seeing growth. And interestingly, by the way, the area that we're seeing enormous growth in, and you will see a record this weekend, is going to be with IMAX. You are going to see more and more large format theaters built in this country and in the world. And you're going to start to see full-length features, not just a 40-minute IMAX film. And that's something that I think when you see Space Station open this weekend, it will surpass the largest grossing IMAX film of all time, which is Everest, at least twice around. It's spectacular. But what you've got now is you have people like Spielberg, you've got people like Jim Cameron, you've got people talking about developing product for the IMAX theaters. So again, no one feels that everyone's going to run away from going to these theaters. And so I think it's a very, very good time with regard to that. I'm not dealing specifically with intellectual property right at this point, just with the state of theaters around the country.
I read today that Kazaa, one of the major peer-to-peer services, is going to offer a subscription model, a subscription service. Would that model work? What do you think Kazaa is trying to do there? Can they do it? Do they own the property that's on there, it's been exchanged on there to do what they're trying to do. Robin.
Well, I'm not familiar with Kazaa's announcement, so I don't know what rights they. I mean, certainly you have to have the copyright holders have to agree to this. So they've made a deal that's outside of my knowledge.
Any licensing agreements you know of?
No, I can almost guarantee you there are no licensing agreements. But I think the reason there are no licensing agreements is because these companies have not been able to develop the technologies necessary to deal with the distribution of the royalties in a proper fashion and to deal with things like microtransactions. These are the struggles that the legitimate record companies are going through right now. People don't realize that they're investing millions and millions of dollars into building the infrastructure that's going to be able to track and deal with all that. It's not just the delivery mechanism itself, but it's all the architecture and infrastructure that goes behind that is necessary. And so none of these quote pirate services have made any investment in doing anything along those lines. And if you look at Napster, the reason Napster is still not up is in a large part due to they haven't figured out the business model. They haven't figured out how to deal with that. Is it a subscription model? Is it paper download? Is it pay per play? What is it? And that's part of the reason they're not in the marketplace right now. So Kazaa saying that they've come up with a subscription model doesn't surprise me, but I guarantee you they haven't obtained any licenses, and I guarantee you they don't intend on sharing any of the subscription fees with any of the artists, and I doubt very seriously anybody's going to pay a subscription fee to get that music when they can get it from other services for free.
Ty?
I think we've got to go through a lot of failed business models to get to where it really needs to be. And it's so difficult because, it's the hardball game. It's not the little softball game. When you go out there and you do subscription models and you have all these great hopes and you sell it to their investors, and one publisher decides they're just not going to play ball with you, or they're going to hold out for a greater rate. I work at a label. And I sit every day and we watch what happens, and but at the same time, what Robin talks about, is it's amazing that could an artist come out and create a piece of art that because they're not encumbered by any sort of large corporation, because I see them, and we see it every day. There's kind of an old story that goes around about the music industry is that you're working outside and you say you're never going to work at a label, and then all of a sudden one day someone offers you a chance to make $1 a year, and you've been making 50 cents a year, and you're going to go, I'm just going to do it for a year, and I'm not going to sell my integrity, but I'm going to go in there and work for the big man. And then you reach that point where one day you have to not work an artist, and you have to make a business decision that you may love that artist's work and their career because of a business decision and because you don't own the company. And you go into your boss's office and I just can't do it. And they go, yeah, we understand, but we're going to pay you $2 a year. And you end up one day, with a house and, private school, and you're making $10 a year. And, you used to be a writer for an indie newspaper at USC, and, you're the person that Robin is pointing at, and, and artists are pointing at, and saying that you're making these corporate decisions and not based upon art, and you've sold out. And it starts out pretty innocently, and I've seen it's pretty amazing what happens. What are we going to do? I think subscription models are we have to experiment with it. Subscription models, we have to go down that path, and it may be a laser disc, it may be analog high definition television. NHK invested in analog high definition television and decided not to go with digital high-definition television. It was a failure, So I think that, we're in the midst of it. We're in the middle of the stream. We don't know where it's going. Business models have to change. And I can give you the perfect example of how the record industry has already changed the business model. Frank, what was the first record you remember buying? When you started your music collection, do you remember the first record?
I think it was Parliament to move off the sucker.
Do you remember the store that you bought it in?
Yeah, it was a small military convenience store over in Germany.
You remember the first record you bought? That, you know, was like your first beginning of your music collection?
Vaguely.
Yeah. Okay. Robin,
Do they have music?
Do you remember when you started building your music collection? Do you remember the purchase that you made?
Sure do.
You will you share with us?
REO Speedwagon.
Okay. Do you remember the store? Do you remember the store that you bought it in?
Yes.
You do?
Yeah.
And what was the name of the store? Do you know?
Kmart.
Kmart. Okay. How many people out here, you college students that are ruining our business, started their music collection, downloading music, and not buying music? Be honest. Come on. No? So everybody in here remembers the first time they bought? Well, you go talk to a 12 and 13-year-old, and they're building their music collections not because of buying something. So our business model, and no disrespect to the people in this room, but we, the music industry, don't live and breathe and don't make our, profits off of the demographic in this room. We're looking for that 12 to 24, 12 to 18, predominantly male, that's going to go out and buy a tremendous amount of rock records and buy hip-hop records. And those early teens are going to buy the pop records. And those records allow us to sign the artists that are not going to be as commercially viable. I mean, that's kind of how this business works. And when we start to see that the 12, 13, and 14-year-olds, when you ask them their experience, it's not going to be that they went and bought a CD, chances are. And I think that the 8 and 9 years old that are already on AOL Kids and learning how to download. And so our business has already changed. And we're struggling with the leadership of our business, understanding that change has already happened. And it's sort of like 3 stages of dealing with this issue. First, there's people fit into 3 categories. They completely ignore, and they just think it's going to go away, and this internet thing. And I guarantee you, there's plenty of executives at the studios, at the record labels, they're still hoping that this is a fad, that it's just going to go away someday. And then there's a second that are paranoid, that they find out that somebody that is their colleague knows more about it than they do, and they're going to lose their job. And then I think the third area is, I think everyone in this room that realizes that there's pros and cons, there's opportunities, there's advantages, and trying to figure a way to embrace it and find out, that, okay, it's over. The buggy whip is done. What are we looking forward to? And more importantly, the customers are going to choose, So long-winded answer to subscription. So far I've yet to see a model where people rent music. They rent movies, but the rental of music choice is the closest thing to that. I use this example all the time. I ended up moving to a place that had music choice. My cable system didn't have it. Everybody know what music choice is? DMX, music choice?
Satellite delivery.
So what happens is that, Adelphia said, you get music choice for free. And I'm like, great, because I would never pay for it. So then, I'd never pay for music on a cable. I'm never going to listen to that. You're out of your mind. So then one day I come home and find out that there's a kids channel because my wife, we have a new baby. And all of a sudden it's like, well, I'm not going to be seen in a record store buying that Barney stuff, So it's fine. Right now, though, if they were to take away the music thing, no way. I'll pay $5 a month. I think subscription is going to have to be something like that. When you go into a restaurant, how many people know that when you go into a restaurant, part of your bill is to pay music for the music that's in a restaurant? Does everybody know that? Did you know when you buy a burger in McDonald's, when you go in, I'm pretty sure they have to pay DMIS cafeteria on campus. Okay, but in the real world, out in the restaurant off campus, sorry, that you have to, there's a licensing fee for playing music in a restaurant. Now, it's very nominal, but it's added onto your bill, and the restaurant has to pay for it. And I think that, what happens is that the artist can potentially get paid, and I think you touch on some of those issues. But it may not be that the consumer sees the micro-charge. That's another way to look at it. And, maybe you can download and stream all the music you want from AOL, but it's now $32 a month. And somehow or another, there's some way or another to distribute that money to the musicians, that the music is being downloaded, the music is being streamed, the movies are being streamed, the electronic books are being streamed. But I think that subscription model is the way we look at it. And, my job is to investigate all of them. And, you go in, it's like Press Play has half of it, but then you got to go and get the rest of it, MusicNet and the like. And I think that that's going to be very difficult for a subscription model to survive. I think what's going to be better is that you get the music, you don't realize that you're paying an incremental charge. Or by the time that you become more, that you really realize you need this. I need kids' music in my house, trust me. When we hit that kids' channel, my kids quiets down, I'm all for it. It's worth $5 to $10 a month. No issue. But if they just sent me a brochure and a commercial, no way. I was too hip. I'm not listening to the music. So I think that we're in phase 1 subscriptions. Most of them will fail. Hopefully we'll get to phase 2, phase 3, and they take 10 different attempts in evolution. But I think the potential's there. It's just we're going to see a lot of R&D.
Was a Jupiter Media Metrics report that said that people are not willing to pay for any content online.
Is that the company
What do you
that's
guys think
teetering on bankruptcy, by the way?
That's correct.
Sorry, Frank, I had to...
Maybe after that report.
Yeah.
I disagree with that statement. I think that if somebody provides value, adds value to the particular content that somebody else can't add, you can only get it there. You can only, there's an additional value that's added by getting it there or by patronizing a particular business. I think that people will pay for it. If you, you can do something like you can sign up to be a fan, to be a fan club member, and then you get first-run concert tickets, opportunities. You get first look at buying the CDs. There's lots of ways you can play with splitting up the money coming from all kinds of different revenue sources, particularly because you have the internet, which means you can build your fan base, you can manage it, you can have your discussion lists and your website announcements, and really interact with your fans one-on-one. You don't need necessarily the label to be your base, your intermediary with the world anymore. So there's a lot of opportunities.
I think that's a fair comment if you're already a known artist and a made artist, and they know how to find you and they know how to discover your music. I don't think that's an accurate analogy if you're talking about an artist that's trying to make it.
Or you don't want to live in Malibu.
Right.
That you are very happy living in Montana or living in Cleveland and making $100,000 a year, and you don't need a tour bus, you don't need a limo, and you're making a decent living and an honest living in that. And I think that we're going to see more of that. Because as the record industry was built upon crazy entrepreneurs. I mean, if you look at some of the great labels, and then they made so much money, and then we were able to take everything that everybody bought on vinyl and sell it to them once again with CDs at a lower royalty rate. Fantastic, and a lot of money was made. I mean, am I off the mark here? But not much, okay? And so then what happened is that, huge corporations said, wow, look at the growth of this. These numbers look fantastic. Let's buy these record labels. And then all of a sudden, what got the record labels, the wild, pioneer, independent spirit that created that industry, is now all of a sudden has to fit into this 90-day break an artist, turn a profit. Erbita, how do you say it? I always mispronounce it on purpose. Earning before...
Yeah, earning, tax and amortization.
Yeah, right. I bet you that USC professor created that acronym.
It's interesting because the same thing is being hyped when you go out and you buy the DVD of the video that you already own. But you bought the DVD because now that you've got your DVD player, you're getting the film trailer, which you're really not interested in, but that's in there, and you're getting all the extras. And what's happened is the studios are frantic because they are trying to find material that they either threw out or lost years ago, so that they can hustle all of you, all of us, into buying the collector's edition of the DVD that you already own that was based on the video that you already own, but this time it's got 10 minutes of an interview with the director talking about a couple of scenes that were never in the film to begin with. Or if you're lucky, you pick 2 or 3 more scenes that you can find. So it's a little bit of the same thing. We're selling the same car a third time out. Studios love it. But that is value added. And the public right now is perceiving that as real value added.
But then you've got Oliver Stone that says, you know what, I love the DVD format because I always fought the studios for my director's cut. And I feel like that it's another opportunity for me to revisit the material and re-release it. And I think that, that's what I love about technology. Sooner or later, someone feels out that there's a much more analog, tactical, creative way to use that. And because I think digital technologies are very, very cold to begin with. I heard Duncan Sheik speak one time. And, this artist, Duncan Sheik, he's on Atlantic, and he said, what I want to do is that I want to give Atlantic the album that they want, that makes money. And then I want to digitally distribute the album that they don't want to release, that's not commercially viable. And I thought, wow, I hope he does that, because I thought that was really cool. And you want to make it lower price, low risk for the label, maybe it's a separate label deal or something like that.
Well, and going to David's point, ultimately that DVD with the added footage, nobody's got a gun to anybody's head saying you have to buy that DVD. The consumer is making a conscious decision that there's some added value in that package, and that I want that in addition to the DVD that I want. So, the interpretation that we're reselling the same thing to consumers, I don't think that's exactly accurate. There is a conscious consumer action that's taking place there, saying that's added value that I want in addition to the
except the consumer is being told that it's added value because the studios are spending the marketing money to convince the public that that's added value.
But you can say that about every product out there.
Of course you can.
Soap,
I just did.
Right.
But I just did.
Right. I'm not disagreeing with you there, but I'm saying I'm the one that ultimately says whether I want to buy that bar of soap or whether I want to change to another bar of soap. And so, or whether I like the garden and herb Triscuits.
You still believe in free will.
Right. Okay.
That's good.
Right. I'm an optimist.
Well, I'll play that clip that you brought. It's a very interesting clip to move our conversation a little bit over to the technology side and how that affects. And I'll play this clip and we'll talk about it.
What happened is that Pat's referencing, he asked me to bring a little 3-minute piece that we did for the NARM convention. I was a little concerned that when we did the NARM convention, I was asked to moderate a digital panel, but there was no consumers there. And I think that's one of the things that the internet is forcing. I mean, every corporation talks to their consumers, the people who buy their product. The traditional record label model is not to do that. We talk to radio stations, we beg, plead, promote. And I wanted some kids' voices.
Jennifer Lopez, John Wolot. I also like Leanne Ryan.
Okay, go ahead, Tom.
Make it bigger?
Yeah.
You want to restart that? Anyway,
Yeah.
So what happened is that, I went to NARM and it said, I just want to have, some consumers in the room. And so we went, and some friends of mine that are filmmakers, we invited 3 girls that are 13 and 14 years old just to talk about, all the issues that NARM was looking at. What was kind of interesting is that some people were surprised by that and others weren't. And so Pat thought it might be pertinent, and make that bigger if you could.
Yeah, I will do that.
And then start from the beginning.
Oops, that's something else. Hold on a second. Here we go, player.
Okay, you want to review? Go to, right.
Jennifer Lopez. I like John Wolot. I also like Leanne Ryan. I like NDRE too. NSYNC. Oh God, I don't like NSYNC. I love NSYNC. I am 14 years old and I have been burning CDs for a year and a half. I'm almost 14 years old and I've been burning CDs for a year and a half. I'm 13 years old and I've been burning CDs 2 years. I have about 5 or 6 burnt CDs. I got the music from the burned CDs from Molly's computer and from Caitlin's computer. The music that I have on my CDs that I burned, I got from Napster, and now I take CDs that I bought or my friend had, and then I burn them into the computer. It's technically against the law to burn or to copy a Microsoft CD or something like that, but you can still do it. And even if they put a label on says you cannot burn the CD, how are they going to stop all these people from burning CDs and all they have to do is stick it into their computer? The music industry is realizing that they're going to lose a lot of money from this because, I walk into CD stores and there's some over $20, and it really isn't worth it when you have a next door neighbor who has that exact CD and can burn it for you in less than 10 minutes. I would still buy a CD if it said I could not copy it. I may even go against the rules because it's so addicting and all my friends may want it and they may not want to spend $15 on the CD, so I may just do it anyway. I think the burning CDs is really addicting because if you're bored or something and you just heard a new song on the radio, you can go get it off the internet and burn it onto a CD. I think it's self-satisfying to burn CDs because you burn it, but you take it out of the computer, it's like, whoa, I have this CD that I made and that I have my own songs that I want. It's fun to have the music on your computer and to have it on CD. It is fun to download CDs and to burn CDs. You get to compare songs with your friends, you can share songs, it's something to do in your spare time. For us, it's really hard because we can't drive to go buy a CD at the store, but we can just download the music off the internet, and it's so easy. It's right there for us. It's not really a big hassle, and it's free too.
A lot of people go to the record store and buy a $20 CD when all they really like is that one single, the first song. I think that's ridiculous to pay $20 for one song.
So CDs went from $17 to $20, maybe down to $12 or $10. So many more people would buy the CDs. But if there was still an option of burning CDs on the internet, I think I would definitely want to do that just because it's so easy and it's so simple and it's free.
You know, these are three random kids that I knew were going to be very opinionated about this. I don't think that they represent a national sample or anything like that. But I think that, you know, the more that we, as a record label, stop looking at focus groups and only talking to retail stores and only talking to radio, and get out there and talk to our customers, and get out and talk to what is our core demographic. You know, I think we're going to have a better way of figuring out, because I see such a myopic view so many times in the record industry, with record labels, not so much the music industry, because I think that's a much broader group of people. So, you know, and I think that, you know, we're depending upon the entry into the marketplace of 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, and 14-year-olds to continue to keep our business at $38 billion a year. I think that, you know, the RAA, and Frank, you can jump in here, you know, there's a certain amount of education about intellectual property that we got to do something about, and at the same time we got to understand that the messaging that we give about respecting intellectual property, if it's not done appropriately and not done in a way that keeps a lot of different options, it's going to fall on deaf ears. But I think, you know, there are plenty of people that still think that, you know, we're going to fix it, there's going to, you know, and without listening to the people that we're depending upon to go into a store and pay $18 to $20 for a CD. That I think we're finding a lot of feedback that people feel like that for one song, that $18 is a lot. And then I think that there's an argument that says, you know, well, we need to, because of the way the business is structured, that we don't allow artists to really develop. There's always, you know, the example of how many years it took for REM to break. And I think there's some merit in that argument, but also, you know, that was then and this is now. And that, you know, as we have built ways to preview music on the internet, and I mean, one of the things that we try to do, and you know, it's been very frustrating. For a year, I've been trying to figure out a way that you know, when you take a CD that someone, some kid, you know, buys a CD, buys 10 blank CDs, and says, "Hey, you know, you want the new Korn CD? No problem. Give me $5." You know, what's the difference in that versus the $18 one that Epic's going to release? You know, I mean, when you're the packaging. Well, you know, I don't know. I can't read the lyrics, and it doesn't. And you can get most of the stuff, and it looks better sometimes on the web. You know, we at labels and we that do marketing have got to figure out a way that, you know, if our customers are looking, you know, blank CD, 39 cents, CD in the store, $18. And see what's the difference. Sounds the same. Fidelity's not as good. 39 cents, $18.39. What choice am I going to make? So one of the experiments that we try to do is that we sit down and talk to Ticketmaster and try to figure out a way that if you bought the CD, then you would be able to buy concert tickets 48 hours before anybody else. And we've been talking to them about that. And I think those are the sort of things it's like, 39 cents, $18.39, but wait, $18.39 means I may say $50, I may say $100 on a scalper. This becomes more valuable. And so, you know, not enhanced where, you know, you have, you know, like one EPK that, you know, didn't spend a lot of money and wasn't that interesting to begin with. You have to play on a computer. But we have to look at the fact that if we're going to continue in the business of selling little pieces of round plastic, that we got to get really creative about this, you know, and also explaining to people and educating people on intellectual property. So that's kind of why I figure, you know, I don't think there's any easy answers about that, but wherever we're heading and what we're doing, we've got to think much more creatively. We've got to think much more in a marketing standpoint. We've got to work with the artists, and we've got to come up with different ideas, you know, and we've got to offer something so that the customer perceives value. I think there's a complete MP3 mentality that, hey, you know, music's free, you know, but what's funny is that, you know, we buy water, you know, and water's free. And I think cable had a bigger challenge too. But, you know, if I'm not mistaken, HBO is doing really great. I mean, how many people watch HBO on Sunday night? How many of you, like, Sunday night is a very important event of watching HBO programming? You know, hopefully you're paying for it. Somebody is. But, I mean, you know, in the beginning, you know, people thought, wow, pay TV, why would I ever have cable? And now you talk to people, and how can I live without cable? How can I live without, you know, digital cable and the like? So we got a long ways to go. And unless we start, all of us that are involved in the creative community and the business part of the creative community continues to start pushing the envelope and thinking different ways and protecting the rights of copyright holders, we're going to see, you know, I think that this is, I think that, you know, technology is definitely having an effect on eroding, you know, the market for selling recorded music. But I also think that people, and, you know, you guys, when you talk to labels, just trying to get people to talk to you, I mean, some people are terrified of talking to you because they don't want to face the truth.
Well, you'll be happy to know that Molly and Caitlin are currently doing time in San Quentin. So,
really?
So yeah. we're doing our part. The third one is a future.
You know, but just so you know, they're all part of Press Play.
Right.
The subscription part of Napster, they were referred to.
Robin, you can step in at any time here.
Should they go to jail, those kids?
Feel free.
Oh,
According to the law.
According to the law, they could well go to jail.
But I mean, according to the law, they have broken the law. And they've publicly done that. And in essence, Frank has the authority to actually find them and prosecute.
But I think
well,
that
he got prosecuted, but he could.
What this really shows to everyone is how the law is in sort of discord with the public's reality, where a lot of people think it's okay to do certain things, and the law maybe says it's not okay to do something. And it's this cleavage between what is the law actually says and what people think that is, I think, creating a lot of the problems. And I think we have to remember, too, that we live in a democracy, and intellectual property laws, like any other kind of laws, should not simply be dictated down to the people from above, but should spring out from the people, from what the people think is a fair way of compensating artists. And I think respect for intellectual property is very important. But I think one thing that also gets overlooked is that intellectual property is a two-way street, that the public actually holds rights in the intellectual property equation as well. Take copyright, for example. Copyright tries to strike a balance, a bargain between competing legitimate interests to use creative expression. So it gives authors certain rights, things like the right to control reproduction, distribution, adaptation, public display, and performance. But then it also gives the public certain rights under the copyright bargain as well, like fair use rights. You're able to make personal use copies of things or copy something in order to criticize. The public domain is another really good example of what is an important part of the public's rights under copyright law. And any kind of discussion about respect for intellectual property, I think, really has to take into consideration the respect for the public's rights here as well. You know, why should the public grant this exclusive monopoly to a recording label when they don't get their end of the bargain back in exchange? I think a lot of these copy-protected CDs are a really good example of the copyright holders really, in some cases, wanting to take all of the rights and all of the privileges that copyright gives them, but none of the responsibilities as well. And so I think it's important that when we talk about intellectual property, we realize that there are rights and responsibilities on both sides of the equation.
But if I'm an artist and I say very clearly, you can't make a copy of my CD.
The law doesn't give you that right. I mean,
but shouldn't I also have that right?
No, because we have First Amendment rights in this country where you can't simply just put a work out there and expect nobody else to be able to comment on it or criticize it, or if they purchase it.
Well, you can comment and criticize on it, but I don't want you to make a copy for fair use.
Then you shouldn't be allowed to have all the benefits of copyright. If you're not going to give the public its fair use rights in exchange, I would say, you know, take your chances and keep it in your head or keep it under a lock.
I want to say this is an unfair use CD, and I want you to pay $18 for it. I want you to know before you buy it that you can't copy it, and I reject the notion that you have fair use to copy it.
I think that is an abuse of the copyright power to expect that you should get all of the rights and all the privileges of being able to exclude others from copying and using something, but not accepting any of the responsibilities.
But isn't my right for creative expression?
Not at all your right. Not at all. Copyright is about balancing of competing legitimate interests, and copyright is a mechanism. The Supreme Court has said this a number of times, that copyright is only a mechanism that is designed to create an economic incentive.
Well,
in
what
order
about
to
if I give up my
people.
right to copyright?
Well, I think that is a more interesting debate. And
You know,
I
it's how you
think,
say, okay, you know what? I don't care about any copyright laws. All I'm telling you is that I'm putting copyright protection on. It's not about a law. It's digitally I'm doing it. You can't make a copy.
I think that is a far more interesting discussion. If you wanted to put your works out there and say, I'm not going to rely on my copyright privileges. I'm going to lock it up with encryption and take my chances that way. I think that's fair. I think that's not unreasonable. But for an artist to expect to have all of the benefits and privileges of copyright, but none of the responsibilities, I think is an abuse.
So I could say,
Frank and
I'm going to
David.
sell you my music, but I'm not going to sell it in a CD. You have to go to my personal server. You have to be encrypted. And if I find out that you ever made a personal copy on that, then I'm going to let you, then I'm still out of luck because I'm not playing the copyright law game that I can go out and prosecute you.
Well, presumably you will have
I'm just rhetorically
made
doing this because we're trying to, academic discussion here, trying to get everybody fired up.
Presumably you will have made an agreement with this individual about what they're allowed to or not do because, copyright law is sort of the default. And so
Right.
Outside of the default agreement, maybe you sign a contract, a license agreement with someone. Then the license governs, for sure. But if it is a sale, if it is someone purchases a CD that they have all the rights and expectations that they'll be able to exercise the full range of their rights with that CD unless they agree otherwise.
So an extension of that is, what do we do for the company that decides that they're going to record every piece of intellectual property and put it on a server, on a barge, in international water, with an OC-48 wireless satellite connection? What do we do to that person?
I don't know what you mean, what do we do with them?
So, because what happens is that if you sit in international water, okay, and you're not bound by any laws of any country, and you violate every sort of notion of copyright, which is what's going to happen, but it has the potential of doing it. I mean, what was didn't you make an example this morning that they moved from Australia to...
Well, the Kazaa system has, changed ownership. It originated in the Netherlands, and it was bought by a company in Australia, and I think as of today, they changed ownership to a company south of Hawaii somewhere. So,
But is it in American territory?
But we could argue I think we're missing one word here, and that is, when we talk about fair use, fair is the operative word here. What is fair use? There are a lot of statutes out there on the books, that obviously get changed, due to evolution and due to changes in technology. And what's happening here is the fair use is being abused, and we don't want to get to the point where that fair use is taken away. And in a perfect world, if nobody, if everybody was ethical and didn't, mass distribute, copyrighted works, we wouldn't be having this debate. So it's easy to point to, the fair use statute, but it's really the abuse of the fair use statute that is causing us these particular issues. And unfortunately, it may get to the point where, I think when the fair use statutes were delineated, yes, I think they were meant to allow people to criticize certain works in certain forms. And yes, copyright industries want to allow, somebody to make a copy for their own personal use, perhaps. But when that gets abused, then sometimes you have to go back and look at the statute and say maybe what it originally was intended for is not how it's being used now, and we need to fix that problem. Nobody wants to go down that path, but we may be forced to go down that path if, in fact, the abuse continues.
But fair use is only about copying. It's not about distribution. It's not a limitation on the distribution rights. So you can't really say that fair use is being used as an excuse for lots of distribution rights, because fair use is about your own personal use rights to make copies of things, not to distribute things to others. That's not fair use. So it really is two very different things.
So peer-to-peer, how does take the phrase peer-to-peer and fair use?
Well, I think that peer-to-peer's best use is other things other than fair use, actually. I think peer-to-peer is a great way, for example, for people to hear protest music or public domain works or things that they already know about and want to be able to experiment. But I'm not, you're right that it's not a fair use to make something available on these systems for somebody else. We're not at all arguing that. If you wanted to download something perhaps that you have in your CD collection, but you haven't ripped it onto an MP3, I think that's arguably a fair use that can be made with peer-to-peer systems. I think another example that gets tossed around is things like sampling. People say, well, I just downloaded this one song and I went out and bought it after I downloaded it. I think that there's an argument that could be made that perhaps that's a fair use. But the thing about fair use that's really important is that there are no bright line rules, and the Supreme Court has been really clear in holding that there ought not be, because it is an equitable defense, and it is something that courts are supposed to analyze each situation and circumstances separately. And there are 4 factors that courts are supposed to take into consideration each time in deciding whether or not something is to be considered a fair use. So I am a little skeptical about technologies that claim we're going to be able to preserve your fair use rights because we're going to let you make that personal use copy. The technology will allow it for you. That's not fair use by design either, because fair use is copying that's lawful but unauthorized. And so if we switch to a world where all copying has to be authorized, then we've lost our fair use rights. It's a very important distinction between a license and liberty, and that's the important distinction.
David, I want to get your opinion on this. And just to add a comment, a lot of PC manufacturers are starting to add DVD burners, for example, on their equipment. Where do you see that going? And just to get your feeling.
And an amendment to that, too, is that what's going to happen when the studios see their market share? I mean, music industry is off by 10%, right?
Correct.
When the film industry sees their market, their industry off by 10%, what do you think is going to happen to the studio? How are they going to react? Are they going to react in a similar fashion that the record industry has? What's going to be their reaction when they find it piracy or whatever, that the amount of money they were making, it's 10% less this year?
They'll put out another DVD. No, I don't mean to be flip. Forgive me. As you were talking about fair use rights, a year ago, I went with Peter Deckham to Hong Kong on a project for the government studying the film and television industry in Hong Kong. And it took 1 week to discover that there is no film industry in Hong Kong, because some fellow sits in a theater when your film opens with a video camera and holds it to the screen, and the next day it's for sale on the street. Now,
For what would be comparable to $1?
Less than $1, generally speaking. If you want it shrink wrapped, you can pay $1. But it's that same balancing act that you've got. Except this is handheld, it's terrible quality. But the idea is that you've got it. You know, you've got it and you don't have to see it. When I was at Universal in one of my lives, we had a film that just celebrated its 20th anniversary, which was E.T. And I remember very clearly a very, very spirited discussion with the senior-most management at MCA. And what it had to do with was, do we take E.T. and completely pass the theatrical distribution of the film in Latin America and sell it directly to television because of the rampant piracy there? And we had very serious conversations with Pepsi-Cola at the time, because they're very strong in the marketplace. And what it came down to was an issue of payment in American dollars. And the deal broke down. But it would have been historic when you think about this, because it's 20 years ago, addressing the issue of piracy. I mean, the film industry is getting killed year after year after year on a worldwide basis.
So you say that, and it's just like saying the record industry being killed. And then, you know, Access Hollywood tonight sees all these people rich. And I think that, you know, the guy in Montana in Middle America has a real problem with that.
There are issues. We get off the subject on this. I don't mean to, but last week was the Masters golf tournament. And being somewhat new to golf, I mean, I get excited about something like that. I'm watching it. And there's a tradition on the first day of the Masters that Sam Snead, who, God bless him, is now about 91 years old, hits the first ball, ceremonial ball. And he got up to the tee and he drove the ball, and the announcer covering it for the network said, "And they're slamming Sammy right down the center." And that was great, except what happened was he shanked the ball to the left and he broke someone's eyeglasses. But you were told, if you were watching it, right down the center. Well, we're, folks, not always getting the information that we should. And we're not always getting quite, you know, the real story. So when you turn on some of these shows and they're hyping, how well films are doing, and you're being told that, that this film did $100 million and so forth, and you think, my God, the studio's just rolling in cash. They don't have that $100 million. And I don't want to get into my class, but you have to really look at about 43% of the total gross of the film that goes to a studio. And for that 43% that they retain, they have the pleasure of marketing the film, paying the cast their $20 million fees or whatever, and everything else that goes along with that, including paying the bank for the interest on the money that they borrowed in order to finance the film. So it's not really that great. Yes, attendance is up, and that's a very, very good sign. But regardless of that, the industry, as with the record industry, and as with several other businesses that rely on intellectual property rights, are being ripped off because you don't know that the DVD that you're buying is the authentic DVD or not. You really can't tell today. And that goes, and part of that goes to the issue of technology and what's available. And what's available to all of us. I mean, I was shocked watching a show on counterfeiting to discover what you can do with a pretty good printer, and it doesn't have to be the highest quality, and what you can do with your computer, and how many counterfeit bills are floating around that have been printed out, on Epson printers or what have you, just because the quality is good. So, I mean, it's what happens with technology. And I guess really the point I'm trying to make is we go back to this whole issue of confusion. You have enormous confusion on the parts of... Part of the problem, I think, is that within the studio system, you have the people who are creating the technology who are not speaking to the creative community. They're not telling the creative community what's happening, and this is what we're developing, and this is how you can work with it. So there's this little bit of this fear factor. Oh my God, there's going to be no film. There's no film in the camera, or we can't do this, or I can't do soft lighting, or I can't get intimate moments on the camera because you want to do this digitally. And there is just really mass confusion right now. And it goes back to the point, which I delight in every day when you read in all of the publications, whether it's Variety or Vanity Fair, that next year you're going to movies and it's all going to be digital, delivery. Well, it isn't. And by the time your children are going to movie theaters, you'll have digital delivery. And it's because they don't have a business model. I delight in the fact, by the way, that one of the greatest shows... First of all, I just want to make a comment to you guys. I want you to understand that in the world of television right now, your top-rated television shows today would have been pulled off the air 15 years ago. They would have been considered failures in terms of their ratings. That's how drastically there's been a decline of network television, which has been picked up by cable and music and lots of other things. But I delight in the fact that Sunday morning Sam Donaldson was hosting a panel and discussing a great phenomenon right now, which is the Ozzy Osbourne show. Somebody finally got it right. How many shows do we have to go through where they stuck cameras in your closet and bathrooms and this, that, and the other thing, and you could pay an access fee to watch people 24 hours a day until somebody finally got it right and put somebody in there as absurd as Ozzy Osbourne? You have a hit show based on, just the fact that they can do this. Technology allows you to go into Ozzy's house and watch his family, and it's like a smash hit, and people can't get over it. There is an example, which I can't get into because I can't name the individuals right now, but there was a group of filmmakers who created a demo film based on the Macintosh iFilm formula, whatever, who just made a development deal with a major studio. They didn't go to SC. They didn't use the Peter Stark program. They didn't access all of the great equipment that's on campus here or campus in New York or what have you. They did it at home with their own systems, and they were able to present a film. I think it was about 23 minutes long, but they now have their first development deal. They did that with equipment that you buy off the shelf. That, to me, in terms of what do we do with technology, is exciting, it's thrilling, it's providing you, all of us, the opportunities that we didn't have 10, 15, 20 years ago.
Do you think that's going to yield social change?
Yes.
How?
Because I think that you're going to find the next Spielberg out there, and I don't know that he's necessarily walking around the campus. He doesn't have to anymore. It goes back to another point, too. What happens if I decide that I want to make a film, and I don't want to have to worry about the fact that I can't get an agent, I can't get a manager, I can't get anybody to return my telephone calls, I don't want to pay a studio a 35 or 30% distribution fee, and I don't want to spend $8 gazillion in marketing. So you know what? I'm going to set up a film, I'm going to make a film, and I'm going to put it out on the internet. I don't even need the theaters. If I can get an audience, which I don't agree with, but if I can get an audience to watch my film on something that isn't the big screen. See, I mean, I think ultimately home theater is great for certain purposes, but it's not, and again, to the point I made before, unless we have another gas crisis, which we will, and people don't drive and don't go out. People need to go out and want to see product in the best way. People still want to go to concerts, still want to see the bands perform live.
We have artists that, Tina Turner did 500,000 records and grossed $80 million on her tour.
So there is this thing. People want to see it.
It was a farewell tour, but still, nonetheless, I mean, you see, I mean, Jimmy
So what
Buffett.
about the Stones?
Yes.
Well, with that, I want to take a minute to thank you all for being here today and open up the floor to 5-10 minutes of questions and see if we have any questions from our audience. And Vicky has a microphone. I want also to let the panel know that this is actually being taped. I believe I told everybody before. It's going to be available
Outside, shrink wrap for $1.
It will be available on the USC site for everybody to view, so your opinions and your thoughts will be shared with many, many more people, and a lot of USC and non-USC people that will access the site to get information on this. So thank you again for being here, and let's get to go some questions.
Hi, I just had a quick question. The AOL Time Warner merger that was supposed to be the next wave of entertainment, whatever it was going to be, why has that bombed so bad so quickly?
I'll give you a quick answer to that, which is, again, to go back to the theory of chaos and confusion. It looks good on paper, and the concept of it sounded great, looked great, but to try to bring those companies together, and by the way, it's not been that long, and to work together and to really achieve the economies of scale and to really redevelop the business models, it's going to take years and years. And I think that we were expecting much too much, much too quickly. I still think it's a great merger. I think it's a great company.
Anybody else in the panel want to address that?
I think goodwill now means something different in accounting practices.
Yes, it does.
And I don't think that, I think AOL is not the only corporation that's, having to readjust because of the way that the government now has changed in lieu of other corporations and what's happened with the explosion of the stock market fueled by the internet. But, it's very interesting for us because we are not a entertainment conglomerate. We are only music. We make records and we have a publishing company. Virgin Records is owned by EMI. And I compete against Warner Brothers, which is owned by AOL. But at the same time, AOL is probably the most important channel for me to sell records through because of the amount of viewership that they have. And we see it time and time again. I mean, when we get an artist, in fact, I just left a session with one of our artists that was at the AOL studios in Culver City. And this is something we worked on for 6 months because we know this artist, Nika Costa, is going to open up for Britney Spears. Nika has pretty much finished on this phase of the record. She's going to go back in the studio, but she's going to do 3 weeks with Britney Spears. AOL is going to be the destination site to promote Britney Spears. And we know that getting her on AOL and working with AOL. And we're always kind of a little bit weird because we see, the Warner Brothers acts favored a little bit more because AOL owns and controls them. So, even the fact that they own a lot of intellectual property, AOL, they still need more than what they own to maintain 24/7 programming on AOL. So we take advantage of that. And we've gone in there and convinced them that they should do a profile on Nika Costa, giving them some exclusive content. We don't let them stream it. We'll probably let them download a version of that. So, I think that, today's press story about AOL and how horrible the merger is, let's see what people say 2 years from now. I think that, we're going, you take a look at every corporation is being impacted by, what's happening with the economy and with this goodwill thing that I don't quite understand, but I know that their companies aren't valued as much because of it. AOL had this huge statement, huge press story because of it. That's my thing.
I was just going to say, the thing that really disappointed me is the concept behind all of this was supposed to be synergy. And it's the word that's been bandied about and failed in a lot of the studios. But I always thought, when you go to the movies, every trailer you see on the theater ends the exact same way. www.mymothersearrings.com or whatever the film is. And the interesting thing is, they're all disgusting. The websites, you guys go on them, they're nothing. It's an EPK, an electronic press kit, thrown up on the web. I had hoped, my hope had been that with the merge, that I was going to really see Warner's developing some incredible things, because after all, it's AOL. Go on the Warner sites and take a look at what they're doing. They're as bad as every other studio at this point.
I can speak to that. I think that what happens is that AOL is dependent upon PG programming. And we participated in an AOL property. Very interesting that you may be able to comment on. And we had. Does everybody know about the Blade series? There was a film that was recently out, Blade 2, Leslie Stein. New Line Cinema, owned by Time Warner. Okay, we had the soundtrack, not owned by Time Warner. We were told that because of the rating of the film, even though that we wanted to preview the audio of the soundtrack that would be edited for radio, FCC, still because of the mature nature, that it would potentially not be in the most premium position of AOL.
It's interesting because today, just going through...
Because their business model is based upon kid-friendly, it's safe to access the internet through AOL. And I think that, and that part of that business model, I think, is one a pillar of their success.
It's also interesting because
David, last comment so we can go to the next.
2001, they had, I think, 67% of the films rated in 2001 were R-rated.
And next question.
The point was made earlier on that copyright should strike a balance, and if you, quite frankly, if you look closely, I think we have reached unprecedented levels of protection for the copyright holder, which is not necessarily the artist, because most of the money, in case of the music industries, goes to the record companies, not the artists. If you look a couple of hundred years prior to this day, you have artists with great qualities like Mozart, laboring for nothing, dying in poverty, and still being extremely creative, which I believe discredits two arguments often made by record companies, for example, that you have to remunerate artists for their travails in the tune of 20 million per record. That's just nonsense. They are artists. They will create regardless. That's just their spirit. And the second is that record companies have to perform the duties of the gatekeeper, which is by itself a function of scarcity, which now technology will allow us to overcome. Why do we need gatekeepers if some other model can do the same thing? It's not practically what it will be, but people want to talk about artists, so they'll share. And if we listen to Mozart today, it's not because the record company sponsored him 300-400 years ago, but because he was just superior in quality, and we still listen to him, I assume.
Well, I work for the record label, so that's my question, I guess. And I shall defend the industry. Well, to begin with, until you've walked in my shoes, you don't know what it's like to work at a record label. And, you know, I can say that, and it's you don't really have an answer for it, but until you sit in a meeting, until you see what goes on, and until you actually watch the day-to-day process, and you see that we sign artists for a lot of money, and the record that they deliver, nobody will buy. And we give them money based upon their previous performance, or their team has done a really good sell job on us. And we take a risk, and I think that there's a fair defense for some record labels, not all of them, that they are doing the best they can for artists. I also, at the same time, I think that in any industry, there are some scoundrels. And I think that there are some people that have abused their power, abused their gatekeeper. I also think that digital technology has created a tremendous amount of music that is crap. And, you know, you go and you surf through all that stuff, and, you know, not having an A&R with someone that can talk to you about song composition and writing lyrics in a right, you know, it's a free country, and you can proliferate and you can put your stuff up there. But I think that, you know, there is some value in having a team of people that have had some experience that can put together collaborations and can, in the studio, can make things sound better. But look, the music industry, you know, I think the indictment is fair. I think that, you know, and so is Arthur Anderson. They screwed up and cheated too. You know, and I think that, you know, that, and I think in a democracy and that we have, and with, you know, tremendous amount of scrutiny by the press and electronic delivery of the press, you know, the more that we get the people out of the music industry that have been unfair to artists, and any time that they can be given an example. And I think we're going through a rough time because we're very vulnerable. But I do think that there is some elements of the record label model that is good and fair to artists, but I think there's other things that need to be fixed. You know, I mean, I think that there is a process of working with an artist creatively, and I think that there's some people that have done that, and they have a pretty good record of that. So, you know, is it fair, the criticism that record labels get? Absolutely. Do we just destroy them and start all over? I don't think so. Do I think that the criticism will move us to pay more attention and change our business model? I hope so. So, you know, and, you know, I also think that it was a different time, and with Mozart, you know, you didn't have a choice. There was no Van Halen. You know, you only had to choose from Mozart. And there was no, you know, Randy Newman, and there was no, and, you know, what's amazing about the music industry is that there was a period where, you know, there was only just a few genres of music. You know, I remember at radio where the reason that they added the records is that there wasn't enough music, contemporary music at the time of that genre. You know, radio, you know, there was no classic rock there. You know, it's only because so much music has happened, and it's become so competitive. So, I agree with you to some extent that there needs to be a change in the evolution, but I don't think you throw out the baby with the bathwater.
Maybe we can take a couple more questions. Yes.
Yes, I want to talk about TiVo. Actually, with TiVo, people can skip over all the commercials. But you know, the current television station, their business model is advertising. So I want to know, how do you think this technology will change the future of television?
I'll give you just one really quick example. There's a company called Princeton Video Imaging. And Princeton Video Imaging has the ability to take a bottle and go back to the syndicated shows of Seinfeld or any show, Friends, what have you, and literally place a bottle of Aquafina on the table here digitally, and you will not know that it's not there. It's one of the ways to combat the fact that you can skip through the commercials. And back to your point about embedding sponsor messages into shows, you're going to see more and more of that. The other thing that I think you're going to see is we're returning to a time where sponsors are going to own the shows. They're not just going to buy commercials within them. They're going to own the shows. And in doing that, they'll be able to embed product within the actual show itself. I think that's another way they're looking to try to combat the fact that you can skip through the commercials.
Or just did that with no boundary on
Yeah,
WB
that's
Network.
right. And the other thing, too, is that, just so you know, in the advertising community, they now recognize hands down that 30-second commercials are failing. And the answer, of course, that we have to think about is a 60 going to do it, or is it going to take a 90 or 120, and who's going to pay for that, and how much are we going to charge? Conversely, how much do I charge to put a bottle of Aquafina in an old show, in a rerun, in syndication? That's a business model that's being worked on right now.
You're also seeing people that that work in huge corporations that are finding that more and more corporations are starting to rethink their television commercial advertising spend and move it toward the internet.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we'll take one more question, and then we have some wonderful food upstairs for you in the reception. Yeah.
Okay. Given all the new technological innovations that we've been privy to, for instance, the internet and whatnot, there still seems to be this notion of vertical integration that's very obvious in the film and music industry. And I'm wondering what your thoughts are on this idea of vertical integration, with the murders of AOL and Time Warner to be a notable example, and how this idea promotes a sense of democracy, if it does at all.
I could speak to that.
Please.
I think it's sort of breeding grounds for censorship in a lot of ways. I mean, if you think about it, you could take Sony, for example, who owns the artist, owns the pipes, owns the CDs, owns the services through which everything is distributed. That's a pretty solid chain of ownership from the beginning of the idea to the time it reaches the eardrum of the individual. And so I think that is problematic because as we are getting fewer and fewer corporations that are holding the rights to all these copyrights, and they're owning all the pipelines and all the media outlets that they can be distributed through. The consequence, and it's really as a business decision, is that there's less variety and there's less diversity. It makes more money to just focus on a few products, a few CDs or individuals, and sell those than the whole diversity of things. So I think it's problematic for democracy to allow the ownership to get in fewer and fewer hands and fewer and fewer distribution outlets.
So do you think France has got it right, that they require their media and their huge mega corporations to make sure that they have a certain amount of investment into French programming? Because this is a big issue now with Universal going through it right now for firing the dude at Canal Plus.
Yeah.
I don't know that I would think that you should pass a law saying X amount of the money should come from a particular source, but I think it is something that we should be conscious of and we should be thinking of and as taking into consideration in our policy decisions.
How do you keep a big corporation in check?
Boy, if I knew that.
I mean, I think technology has always been an element of social change. And I think that when you have all this power, you look throughout history in a bigger arc, as it starts to mobilize, the reaction to it is that artists stand up.
Yeah, I think that is how do you attack power like that? I think is with truth and with voices and with discussion and debate and lots of people talking about the issues, and you will eventually get to the truth about certain things.
I mean, it's extraordinary that, if the head of CBS television got fired, who cares? But the head of Canal Plus gets fired, and there's people in the streets. I mean, they actually had protests. And I think it had something to do with the fact that they felt like that French culture was, because my understanding is that because Canal Plus, help me out with this, was somewhat of a monopoly in France, that they had to also make investments into French culture and film.
That's correct. That's correct. And they did. They rioted in the streets. They actually went off the air in protest.
Well, I want to thank our panelists again. Give them a round of applause. And thank you for being here at Annenberg. We have a wonderful reception upstairs that I want you guys to stay for at least a few minutes. We have some wonderful food. So we'll just get everybody there. Thank you all for coming. We look forward to bringing more stuff here. I won't be here because I'm graduating on Monday. So.
Congratulations.